Fans tend to have an uncanny ability to breathe new life into video games posthumously. It always amazes me to see how fans can modify games for years after their release, and sometimes even find unused content and hidden secrets that the collective fanbase were never aware of. I think these efforts and projects really help increase the longevity of a game, and help enrich the community surrounding the game, and help maintain interest in it for years to come. One such game that gets a lot of love is Spider-Man 2000. This was my first video game ever, and to see such an active community of creators still talking about the game, still modding the game, and memeing the hell out of it, brings me such indescribable joy. I remember a few years ago stumbling across a page called Obscure Spider-Man Memes, filled with jokes, memes, and references to the old superhero video game classic. I loved it so much. I followed the page for years, and eventually the fanbase slowly died off and moved on. But recently, I've discovered a whole new hotbed of Spider-Man 2000 activity. I came across Anganoff's YouTube channel through his source filmmaker Spider-Man videos, and soon came to find out that he had a lot of content based on this beloved classic. I even found out that there was a Discord server filled with fans of the classic, and from there, I stumbled down a rabbit hole that led to a treasure trove of information. One thing many people don't know is that Spider-Man 2000 was actually developed side by side with Tony Hawk Pro Skater 2, and in fact, they even run on the same engine. Anganoff actually has a really funny video where he replaces assets from Spider-Man 2000 with assets from Tony Hawk. You should really check out that video, and to be honest, his channel in general, because he's got a lot of great Spider-Man content. One of the ways Anganoff was able to create some of these videos, and others have created amazing custom costumes for the game, is via Crystal Gamer's custom texture loader. This tool has been fundamental in developing new custom content for the game. Now artists and fans from all across the internet are creating all new costumes, bringing new content into this game for the first time in almost 2 decades. Some of these are really good and just blow me away. Here are some of my favorite costumes in action. If you want to learn how to use the custom texture loader, then check out Crystal Gamer's video on it in the description down below. Some of my favorite costumes are Pizza Time, Lemon Man, Pepsi, and the Spectacular model. But there's so many great custom skins out there right now, I can't even keep up with them. Something else interesting was found by Crystal Gamer. The PC and Dreamcast ports of Spider-Man 2000 were fortunate enough to get graphical upgrades, resulting in higher polygon models with better textures and higher fidelity cutscenes. But if you're itching for that PlayStation 1, Nintendo 64 era charm and nostalgia, then lucky for you. Crystal Gamer accidentally stumbled upon a way to boot up the PlayStation 1 version of Spider-Man 2000 from inside the PC version, meaning that the PC edition of Spider-Man 2000 actually contains all the data from the PlayStation 1 version, outside of the pre-rendered cutscenes and full motion video. Interestingly enough, this game actually has a direct sequel, but it tends to get overlooked and ignored by most of the Spider-Man 2000 community as a whole. It's usually seen as lackluster, and that's because the game was handed off to another studio instead of Neversoft. The game was developed by Vicarious Visions and was originally set to be released sometime in fall 2001. The game was already in production and discs had already been pressed for release when the 9/11 World Trade Center bombings took place. The game originally had taken place on top of one of the World Trade Center's twin towers, and Activision had to cease production and delay the games in order to alter the ending and the final boss battle. However, despite their efforts, a few pre-9/11 editions managed to make their way out into the world anyway. Solid Snake 11 has taken the liberty of creating a video showcasing the differences between versions. If you're interested, you should really check it out. I've got a link in the description down below. But getting back on topic, in my opinion, the second game really lacks a lot of the heart of the first. Despite a couple of technical improvements, to be honest, I've never even played more than a few levels of this game. It always bores me, and I end up putting it down out of apathy. As compared to the original Spider-Man 2000, where I pick it up and then all of a sudden I've beaten the game 3 hours later. Or 2 if I skip cutscenes. In an attempt to showcase some of the better elements of Enter Electro, Anganoff is actually working on a mod for the PC port of Spider-Man 2000, the first game, that alters the levels, enemies, and textures, and your combat moves to resemble that of Enter Electro. The mod is still a work in progress, but you can find out more about it on his channel. I actually played an unfinished version of this mod, and I really enjoyed it. It's awesome to see one of my favorite games altered like this. It makes it feel fresh again, like a remix. I can't wait to see when it's completed. I'm sure it'll be spectacular. And by the way, I have one last odd little theory about Enter Electro. So it came out almost a year after Spider-Man 2000, and I think that while Neversoft was developing the first game, Vicarious Visions had already begun production on Enter Electro. The biggest identifier for this is that in Enter Electro, Spider-Man's face by the health bar is the same as Spider-Man's face in the demo discs and beta versions of Spider-Man 2000, the first game. So I think that Enter Electro was probably based on a beta version of the game, and likely began production before Spider-Man 2000 was even released. Mainly because in the release version of Spider-Man 2000, the art has been changed, but in Enter Electro, it's the same as the demo discs and betas, which were an older version of the game. But that's just my little conspiracy theory. A YouTuber known as MegaRoxas12 managed to obtain a broken copy of the game's beta, and Solid Snake 11 managed to fix it to a functioning capacity, and now we actually have a working beta version of Spider-Man 2000. And there's a whole lot of content that was removed or changed. So let's go over that briefly. There's a bunch of lines voiced by Stan Lee that ended up not being in the final edition of the game. Stan Lee has an entire narration at the end of the game, but it's only actually present in the Japanese release. But what I think the most interesting thing about Stan's lines is that they seem to imply that Tony Hawk was supposed to be viewable in the character viewer, and maybe even playable as a costume for Spider-Man as well. And all we got were ads and product placement all over the city. In that same vein, Spider-Ham was originally planned to be a costume, and Iron Man was supposed to make a cameo appearance in the game as well. But what I think is most interesting about the beta is that there's files for a completely different looking symbiote than what we got in the game. Anganoff went through the trouble of taking the textures, rigging them up, and showing us what they would have looked like in game. By our best guess, these guys would have either been too scary for kids or would have affected the rating of the game, so they changed them from being little carnivorous slasher horror aliens to cute and gross gooey slime balls. Interestingly enough, they actually look like an enemy from Silent Hill that was removed from the game in some regions as well. Remember what I said about Spider-Man 2000 and Enter Electro being in development at the same time? I think at least for a short period, Spider-Man the movie for PS2 was probably in development alongside them. Seeing as all three games were overseen and published by Activision, I don't think it's insane to assume that the devs would have been in contact with one another, or at least kept up with what the other devs are doing. After all, Spider-Man 2002 does take everything Spider-Man 2000 did and just take it up a notch. 2002's gameplay is really just an extension of 2000's in my opinion. But I think one of the main things backing up this theory is that in the beta of Spider-Man 2000, Scorpion is wearing a completely different costume, which looks a lot more akin to his classic green design. However, in the final release edition of the game, it's more purple and armored. And in fact, it's the exact same costume as in Spider-Man 2002. And before you rage comment, I know, the costume is taken from some of the 90s comics, but I can't help but feel that maybe early on in the development of 2002, they made the decision to use the purple suit for Scorpion, and after seeing this, Neversoft decided to change their design too. But that's just another one of my conspiracy theories about the game. I'd like to know why they changed it, because to be honest, I think I might prefer the green costume to the scary old lady face we got in the final version. Scorpion looks kind of uncanny here. The last thing I'm going to mention about the beta is that Monster Rock's design was originally entirely different as well. In addition to that, Rhino's boss fight was entirely different too. There's a few things here and there I left out about the beta, so if you're interested in finding out more about the beta or the specifics of it and its history, you should check out Anganoff's video on the beta in the description down below. He documents it a lot better than I have here. And one last thing before I let you go. Did you know that Spider-Man 2000 had a prequel tie-in comic that was only ever released in a single issue of GamePro? A lot of people don't know that, and in fact, you can't even find scans of it anywhere online, or much info about the plot at all. So I ventured out and managed to obtain the comic to share with all of you. It actually adds some interesting details to the plot of the game and adds some context to the characters' motivations. If you liked this video, then you should definitely go check that one out. And once again, I'd like to thank everyone at the Spider-Man 2000 Discord and all the Spidey YouTubers for keeping this game alive. You guys are the best. There's a playlist of over 100 of the best Spider-Man 2000 videos at the end of this video, and it'll be in the comments down below as well. Keep wall crawling, webheads. I'd also like to thank everyone who's checked out my channel. I just passed 50 subs, and that means a lot. I never expected my first 6 months on YouTube would go so well. If you'd like to chat with me about comics, then you should check out my Twitter. I love hearing opinions about comic book news, and I'd love to hear yours too. If you like superhero memes and action figures, then I try to regularly update my Instagram as well. I post updates on videos on both sites, but if you really want to make sure you catch the next Super Swim Team 7 video, you should make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell as well. If you want to support the channel, then liking and sharing the video is always appreciated. Once again, thanks for watching. Swim Team Captain 7, signing off.